And away we go, spawning in the upper right. In the blue, of course, representing... Who is he representing? There we go, the Freak of Freaks. He is Stats. And his opponent in the bottom left. In the red, the Night King, French Esports. He is SERRAL. And really the question here, we got to be asking ourselves, as we ask ourselves in pretty much any PvZ at this point in time, is do we see Stargate play? And more importantly, do we see double Stargate play? Because a Stargate opener, it makes a lot of sense. It is a way to get on into a third base pretty easily without really going and having to get some damage done, right? Yeah, your Oracle wants to get something done, but it's a good, solid defensive opener. Maybe this was a mistake using Funkus POV. Maybe it was a mistake, but anyway, we do have here some fun stuff showing on up. Now we're gonna have to see exactly what's gonna happen at this point. Of course, we don't know anything yet. We do know, of course, SERRAL, he takes the third base as his natural, or natural as his third base. Yeah, third base is his natural is probably the way to say that, because he just, at this point, rogue blocks are so common, or just so run-of-the-mill that you just kind of do it and you're fine. You just kind of do what you want, and it is absolutely A-okay. So, at this point, third base is going to get taken at around 28 supply at this point. SERRAL, not one to play the Korean style, but you get a third at 19. And Stats at this point, we're really going to be able to see what he wants to do once the Cyber Core is done. Once he has that gas, has the 150 gas to either get a Warp Gate or get a Stargate. Again, it's going to be Warp Gate first, but that doesn't mean, of course, Warp Gate's a little bit cheaper than Stargate. But anyway, you just look at the timings. That doesn't mean it's not going to be a Stargate. Oh, that's interesting. So Stats, in fact, going for Warp Gate into Stargate, canceling Warp Gate, then getting so Warp Gate into Stargate, canceling Warp Gate, so you can get Stargate faster than getting Warp Gate again. I gotta imagine that's a mistake. I don't see any level of efficiency in doing that, but you know what, Stats? He is one of the greatest Protoss players of all time. If anyone knows anything about that, it is certainly him, but yeah, I can't imagine that was what was intended. Alright, so now we got a couple of depths. They're going to try to dive on in here and not really linking up their shots appropriately, so they could have very easily gotten at least one probe. Excuse me, one drone, but they were unsuccessful. And honestly, Stats, he's making a couple mistakes here in the early game. Not getting the drones that he should have gotten. Autopilot, maybe autopilot getting that Warp Gate instead of going straight into Stargate if you're going to go Stargate first. All of these things are a little bit weird. They're not what you kind of what we've come to expect from the Shield of Ire, but again, they're not really game-ending either. It's more of missed opportunities. Now, whether he opts to do anything with these missed opportunities, who knows? But we do have an Oracle on the way at this point. Maybe he's going to be able to do a little bit more there. And Zerglings are going to try to cancel this third base, but with the Adepts, with the Void Ray, not going to be all that successful. Even if that one Adept is pretty much on death's doorstep at this point. So now we got Stats doing the Stats build. I don't know if this was Stats that developed this, but Stats was certainly one of the first players I saw starting to do it with any bit of regularity, and it's pretty cool. It's a very powerful idea, and it's not gonna work. I don't think it's gonna work this game, but the idea here is a lot of Zerg players will go and they say, okay, it's a Stargate opener. What am I gonna do? I am going to skip my Roach War. I'm going to go and try to do something like that. I'm gonna just be as greedy as possible. And I'm going to go and just drone, go strictly into my Hydra Den, do all that. And, well, how does Stats punish this? He just gets a rather quick, he gets Glaives a little bit later off of that third base. And from there, well, he just goes and punishes the Zerg player for not having anything that fights Adepts all that well. But that's not what this game is. Alright, the Adepts will find this third base and shade on in here, but drones have already been pulled, preemptively been pulled, and now it's just a bunch of Queens, a bunch of Roaches, a bunch of Ravagers will find their way on into this natural, though, so the third base should go down. Really, the question is whether the Adepts will be able to get enough damage here into the main base, into the natural, to justify that the damage that Stats is about to take, as those force fields are going to be fantastic, by the way. A couple of Ravagers will go down ASAP, and yeah, these Adepts are not getting anything done either, so the only question at this point is how much can Stats do? Well, really, is how will Stats be able to keep that to stay alive? And look at this, he's already just moving a bunch of Adepts across the map here. They will find a bunch of Zerglings, so that's going to be really nice, cutting off that Zergling rally. Because, of course, we're not going to see a lot more Roaches. We're not going to see a lot more Ravagers. Okay, cool guys don't look at explosions, but we're not going to see a lot more Roaches or Ravagers really built. At this point, I wouldn't think to try to get aggressive because, A, the third base goes down. SERRAL, it's now time for him to go home. But I do love this from the finished Zerg player. He has a full wall up here on into the natural. But, I mean, it's a lot of Adepts. They attack up pretty fast. The full wall is not really going to stay on up here. Cancel will save SERRAL a little bit of money. But now it's a bunch of Adepts on into the natural. It's just Zerglings as well. The Queens are not anywhere close to being home. Yeah, we got a couple Roaches, but now, oh, the Adepts will find their way on into the main base. And again, there are no Queens, right? There's nothing that is solidly anti-air. And the Stasis Trap, my god, that Stasis Trap, that is going to be a force field there on the ramp. So the Adepts can get as much damage done as they want on into the main base with impunity because there's no way to fire your way. It's a free force field. So yeah, the Adepts, they're going to maybe shade on down here, but I like them just kind of sitting up into the main base and killing the lair. That is absolutely the plan. I love that Stats is going to go do that. Yeah, the force field's going to run out now, but we're going to see a recall pretty soon. The lair goes down, the main base goes down, and this game is wonky as hell. Now the Adepts, there we go, it's just going to be a recall. A couple of them will go down, of course, but at the end of the day, okay, that's actually not going to tell us what we need to see, but 20 workers have died thus far, but more importantly, not too many Adepts died. The lair went down. It's a 2-base Zerg against a 2.5-base Brudos. And a little birdie tells me, something tells me that Stats is not going to be unhappy with that whatsoever, as an Overlord actually is going to get sniped as well. Void Ray is going to be able to get out with impunity. And now Blink is just about done. +1 is halfway done. Do we have any Immortals out? We have Immortals on the way. So this tech path that SERRAL's going to go for with Roaches and Ravagers and things like that, not even going to be all that impactful anymore. Blink Stalkers are good against Roaches. Immortals are fantastic against Roaches. Alright, so the Void Wave will get targeted down, unfortunately. How many Queens do we have left? We have 9 Queens on the map still, so that's still a scary force. But again, the longer this goes, look at the Stats he's going on into Disruptor Tech behind this. We got a second Robo on the way. And Queens, Ravagers, all these fun things, they don't really deal with, they don't really dodge Disruptor shots all that well. So Zerglings will get on top of a bunch of these Stalkers. Zerglings, of course, one of the best possible options against Stalkers at this point. They Stalkers, they attack slow, Zerglings attack fast. And Stalkers, they're pretty, there are a ton of them, and they don't have a lot of, and Stalkers don't have a lot of health. So, yeah, again, that is kind of the traditional hard counter, right? In the Zerg arsenal, it's Ling Hydra against Stalkers, things like that. The Adepts, yeah, they're not going to shade on into that. That's an immediate death. But anyway, now we have the Robo Bay done. Second Robo done as well, excuse me. So, oh, it's going to be Colossus tech. Okay. I really would have expected to see some Disruptors here, but, you know, Colossus still good too. Good against the Zerglings. Good for sustained DPS. Okay, no, Stats realizes that he clicked the wrong button, so we have Disruptors on the way here. Another Immortal will come on in, flanking on in here, though that should just go down. There is, of course, the main base. It is done, but it's not mining here whatsoever. We do have a Warp in of Zealots, and now, or excuse me, of Adepts, and now, well, it's just a question of whether Stats can make the hold, and it looks like the army of SERRAL is just slowly running out of steam. It's +1 versus +1, of course, but with shield battery overcharge, the Immortal is standing strong. That's going to be it. GG Stats is going to take game number 1. Beyond won game number 5. I answered a no one. He went and he just, he killed the third base with his first push with a couple tanks, and he just kind of bopped Joan in that game. Unfortunately, the first 4 games were fantastic. 5th game, Joan just not quite as good, not quite there as much, unfortunately. But that's how these things go sometimes. Beyond did end up winning the game, and $120 richer, so good for him. But now we're going to go on into game 2 here of Stats versus SERRAL Grand Finals of the StayAtHome Story Cup number 3. Yeah, the tank push finally worked out. It was a bunch of Marauders and tanks, and you're looking at this, you're like, okay, Joan's got a little bit of time. And then suddenly his base is dead, and you're like, oh, well, all right, so we do have a game number 2 loaded on up here. We'll be on Death Aura. Stats has that tasty 1-0 lead. Let's get on into things, shall we? Wow. That's what I'm looking for. Anyway, there we go. Okay. So, spawning in the bottom right. In the red, of course, not representing Red Bull. Of course, this is just a little bit of a bug. I guess they selected Bomber as the player for both players, and he's not Bomber. So anyway, spawning in the bottom right. In the red, down 1 game to 0 in this best of 3 for NC Sports. He is SERRAL. And his opponent in the upper left, in the blue, the Shield of Ire, representing for the Freak of Freaks, he is Stats. So this is Death Aura, right? And the question we're really asking ourselves is, do we see the double Stargate build? Stats, of course, did open with the Stargate game number 1, but he played his Adept Glaives out of a Stargate style. You get your third base at a still relevant timing at 354 minutes, and then you just don't take the gases on your third base for a little bit of time. You get a bunch of Glaive Adepts, and you try to punish the Zerg for being a little bit too greedy. Now, that wasn't what happened. SERRAL, in fact, was the opposite of greedy. He stopped building workers at 46. He built a bunch of Roaches, a bunch of Ravagers, a bunch of Zerglings, and tried to kill his opponent. But unfortunately, even as SERRAL killed the third base, that wasn't enough damage. Especially considering that SERRAL took so much damage, and he actually lost the lair due to a insanely clutch stasis trap that trapped a bunch of Ravagers, that force fielded the ramp. That meant there was no way that SERRAL could wow. That meant that SERRAL could actually get on up the main ramp. And, well, that meant the main base did die. And that was really the beginning of the end for SERRAL in that game. But now we're into game 2. It is Death Aura. It is the map of 4 free bases. In the Beyond Rogue games, we only did 1 of them. That was game 2. Beyond did end up winning in 22 minutes. Fantastic game, actually. I recommend going back and taking a look at it. The entire series is not cast by me. It's cast by a different caster on the Alpha X YouTube channel, if you're curious to see how the entire series does end up. Okay, SERRAL, of course, getting a Zergling on into the main base. We'll see that there is a Stargate that is just about done. So, of course, this is once again Stargate into Warpgate. Not Warpgate into Stargate. That being said, not a big difference. I do tend to prefer Warpgate into Stargate in the current meta just because it's one more thing that the Zerg has to scout. Generally, now there are some anachronistic Immortal Sentry builds that just don't really work. But there are some anachronistic Robo first builds where you get a Robo before Warpgate and whatever, but you don't see that in the pro play. Generally, when you see it's 2:30 and you don't see a warp gate get started, or the warp gate gets started right around 2:30, you know it's a Stargate. So that is just one less thing that the Zerg has to think about, has to scout to figure out exactly what's happening. So if you go Warp Gate first, you get that Warp Gate a little bit faster, which means it's a little bit easier to take your third base. And the Zerg is maybe just forced to scout a little bit more, forced to be guessing a little bit more. Now, of course, you get your Stargate units just a little bit slower. You don't get the you don't have that 330 Oracle should you choose to do so. But honestly, even with these Stargate first builds that I've seen a lot of players doing at this point, I don't even really see the I don't see Oracle first. It's still Void Ray into Oracle at this point, and the Oracle gets out a little bit later. And then the question is just how much damage does that Oracle get? But there we go. Second Stargate on the way. So this is a variant of the trap build that we all love so much that has taken the world of PvZ by storm and really made, for the first time in a while, made ZVP feel somewhat Protoss favored. Now, is it actually Protoss favored? Is it Zerg favored? That is a question for players that are far more qualified players than I to answer that question, to attempt to talk about that question. I'm just going to say that it does feel a lot stronger for Protoss players at this point, and it has led to this interesting build dichotomy, where you see a lot of Zerg players realize that, like, honestly, whether or not it's balanced, I don't think it's all that fun to play in the late game. I don't think it's all that engaging to play in the late game. I think it's kind of hard to do, so you see these German taxis, these Soul subways, these Soul strolls, these Warsaw subways, that players go for, where they get a bunch of queens and a bunch of roaches and a bunch of ravagers and try to kill the Protoss player before they get to that critical mass, right? Before they get carriers out, things like that. And we're going to have to see whether that is something that SERRAL is interested in doing in this game. Currently only on 6 queens, but that's still a decent amount for this point in the game. We're going to have to see if it goes up even more. 7th, of course, on the way, and that's kind of more than you would normally get against a Protoss. But of course, the meta has changed. We do see more and more queens being built here because it just feels good, right? You with the more and more Stargate units being made, you want that amount of queens. You want to have 4 or 5 creep queens that you can move around and ward off Void Rays and do all that. So, regardless of whether or not SERRAL is going for some sort of attack, and it is going to be a Hydra Den here. That is rather interesting. Maybe he just kind of thinks that, look, he took a little bit too much damage from that Oracle, so... Oh, that's going to be a nice stasis trap. It looks like it got, how many were... I can't tell. Looks like it got about 4 workers. Okay. So stasis trap's going to get 4 workers, which is, you know, it's not one of the biggest ones you've seen, but generally it only gets 1, so, you know, Stats is not complaining there whatsoever. +1 ranged, of course, on the way. Bailey Nest as well, so it looks like SERRAL's going to try to hit this Lingbane Hydra timing. But if there's one thing that we have learned about this trap style, is that, okay, actually, this Circling Run By has a chance to maybe cancel the space, but no, it's just going to get the probe. It hits a little bit too late, right? By then, Stats will have Charge Lot Immortal, or Charge Lot Storm, Charge Lot Archon Storm on the way, and then Storms are just fantastic against everything that SERRAL's going to have. So, I don't know, maybe we see some sort of Lurker tech. That would be pretty cool. We did see Raynor use that against Zest in the Grand Finals of IM Katowice, punishing the fact that that Zest never really went for Disruptors. So, we saw some Lurker timings with Hydras, and then the Hydras were able to just, the Lurkers were just able to kill off everything on the ground. Storm's not really possible because, of course, the Lurkers were there. And, well, interestingly enough, we do see Stats getting a little bit aggressive here instead of the other way around. Now, I think SERRAL has what he needs to defend this. That being said, he is down in army supply just a little bit. So, now he's just going to stay back for the time being. And this is just a creep clearing mission. And I do like this from Stats, of course. One of the things that Protoss players have long complained about is that it is very difficult until you have, your Death Ball 150-odd supply army. It is very difficult for Protoss players to actively control the creep in any meaningful way. That is in part why they made the Oracle changes to Revelation that they did. Right, it was made cheaper, it stuck to the ground, so you could actually use a couple Oracles to delay creep. Or Oracles and, 1 Oracle and some Zealots or Adepts or whatever you want to call it. That was, of course, one of the goals there of the Revelation change. Granted, we don't see it really used all that much, but anyway. When do we see changes in... when do we see balance changes actually used as intended? Not all that often. But anyway, now we have +1 air on the way here. Storm is just about done. And we should see a fleet beacon on the way soon. Stats, he has his free 4 bases. Storm is done in 12 seconds. And that's just about the point where it's kind of impregnable for SERRAL to really get a whole lot of anything done, right? Once you get Storm, once you get that static defense, that SimCity, I don't see SERRAL breaking this. So SERRAL realizing this is, okay, well, time for me to do some more stuff. Right, we do have a double spire on the way. SERRAL will take his 5th base. And he's just kind of realizing that, you know what, this is not a game that I can realistically end anytime soon. It's Death Aura. 4 bases are free. 5th base, it's a little bit harder to get, of course, but 4 bases are free. And we need to go a little bit further. So, Ultra Cavern, a couple Vipers, all of these fun things. Vipers, of course, really nice. You get the Abducts, you kill off a couple carriers. But the Ultra Cavern is something that we've seen more and more Zerg players do. I answer to no one. If you don't believe me about balance changes having intended results, take a look at the StarCraft balance Twitter. It will absolutely inform you as to how every balance change is intended to be used, or something like that. In all honesty, though, that's a fantastic parody account. I do enjoy it. But anyway, talking about Ultras here, this is something that we're going to see a 3rd Spire. Huh. Don't know why SERRAL is going for that 3rd Spire. Maybe, okay, so it's going to be Greater Spire. I mean, it's not like that. Okay, yeah, he's just going to cancel that. That was a mistake. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense. Anyway, Greater Spire on the way and a bunch of Ultras on the way as well. And this is a pretty cool thing that we've seen Zerg players start to do more and more often, right? Yeah, it's a Twitter account. It's the StarCraft balance team Twitter. But anyway, with the Ultras here, their whole goal is A, they kill bases pretty fast, which is nice, but B, they just dive on top of the High Templar and they force Archon morphs. And once Storm is gone, well, suddenly the Zerg army can fight what there is, what the Protoss has a little bit easier. Because again, the big scary thing against these Corruptor styles, it's not the carriers. I mean, carriers don't really fight Corruptors all that well, especially not when you're at 3/3 Corruptors. It's the Storms, it's the Archons, it's these things that, honestly, it's the job of the ground Zerg army to deal with. So we got a couple Corruptors on the way, but there's still a lot of supply that SERRAL has to free on up here. So he's going to have like 8 Corruptors, which is not a lot. So we got Broodlords on the way here, and this is interesting, right? So +2 carriers are just about done. I mean, honestly, I would just love to see. I just want to see that busted down. But oh man, those storms are going to be absolutely fantastic. And that run by from SERRAL looked promising. It's not promising anymore, and that's just kind of one of those reasons why any sort of Hydroling Bane tech, it's just not valid in this matchup. Not anymore. So a +2 will be allowed to complete now. For the carriers, and +2 carriers are just about terrifying. Just about one of the scariest things that does exist in this meta. And I think we're just going to hit that point where we're going to see that +2 carrier timing. And I don't know what SERRAL has to do with this. He's got 9 Corruptors, he's got 17 Hydras. Storm deals with with both those pretty easily. So SERRAL's going to move across the map and try to deal with something, but there's just not enough here. There's a decent amount of static defense to be sure, but there are a bunch of Immortals, a bunch of Archons, nice feedbacks on top of all of those Vipers, which means the Vipers are not going to get anything done. Queens are here trying to make that defense, but these are 1/1 Queens against the +2 carriers. They're not going to do a whole lot. And yeah, we do, of course, have the army of SERRAL here on the other side of the map, knocking down a base of stats, but it's one base, right? Stats, I don't think it's going to take much more than this. And actually, yeah, SERRAL's not even going to really commit to this, only leaving a couple Hydras to eventually kill that off, because we have the Golden Armada marching on in. No, Hydras are going to look to try to flank this, just maybe, but we're going to see some nice Storms on top of all of those Hydras. And Ultras will, of course, try to get on top of things, but there are enough Archons, there are enough Immortals that these High Templars will stay alive. GG, the +2 timing is too powerful. Stats, he's going to take game number 2. Yeah, Parasitic Bomb. It's not useful whatsoever against carriers unless... Actually, did a Parasitic Bomb go off? I didn't see it. But not all that useful unless the Corruptors dive immediately on top of the carriers. Which is not... Oh, shoot. Yeah, Parasitic Bomb is really good if you dive all the Corruptors on top of the carriers, and then the Parasitic Bomb kills off all the Interceptors, but that's not what happened. But anyways, what we do have is, I believe I heard the clarion call of Stream Raiders, so we're going to get on into that. And then we're going to get on into Game 3 of this best of 5. Well, actually, we're going to get things set on up in here first. We're going to get on into Stream Raiders. There we go. Yeah, you're not wrong. That if you get, it's called the Loco technique, and if you are able to dive your corruptors on top of things, and then do something like that, then it works out pretty well. Then you can be pretty happy with that, but it's still pretty difficult, and you need to have really good splits on your corruptors to make it worthwhile. Potentially, I think this is probably going to be the last battle regardless of how this series ends up, but we got one more battle. It's going to show on up here. Let's do it. And now, we have our third and perhaps last game of this series. Stats got that 2-0 lead. He's looking damn good in this series thus far, so let's get into it. And here we are, spawning in the upper left. In the blue, up 2 games to 0. Give it up for Stats. And his opponent in the bottom right, in the red, representing NZ Sports. Down 2 games to 0, but, you know, he's SERRAL. He is never out. Give it up for SERRAL. So we do have SERRAL once again going your kind of standard build, and this is of course the shortest map in the pool. I'm kind of surprised this is game 3 in a best of 5 in a PvZ, but I guess well, I actually don't know I don't remember what was banned out for this, but anyway, we're gonna have to see how Stats decides to react to this. I think the onus in this game in dealing with this map is more on Stats than it is on SERRAL, because say Ling Floods, for example, a bunch of early all-ins are maybe a little bit more powerful than they are for Stats. That being said, what was I saying? If the game goes later, this map is actually going to be really good for Stats. It's kind of the same idea why Submarine is very good for mech play. Because if you look at the number of bases that the Zerg can realistically be expected to take, it's about 6. It's not the 7, 8, 9 that you might see on other maps. So there's not this game. SERRAL doesn't really have this game where he can go on in there and just greed out to all hell, get to 100 workers, just own the map, and out-trade and trade poorly, but just eventually get what he needs. Right? We're not going to see that on in here. Because of course it's only 6 bases. Now, yeah, SERRAL, maybe if he really gets good creep spread and really has some good position, he can start taking 1 to 2 bases from Stats, but realistically that's not a base that will be allowed to mine for all that long, because by that point it's going to be mass sky toss, and if Stats cannot prevent that base from getting taken, well, he's kind of lost the game anyways. So if this game goes late, I think Stats does have the advantage, but SERRAL absolutely has the ability to make something happen in the early mid-game just because of how quick the rush distance is, especially for something like a Queen Walk. Queen Walks are so powerful on this map because, again, shortest rush distance in the pool. So we got actually, this is interesting. So Stats opting for one Oracle, going into a second Oracle here, and normally when we've seen these Stargate openers, it's been Void Rays, right? It's been a Void Ray into an Oracle or something like that. But in this game, that is not the case. So we're going to have to see whether he's maybe going to catch SERRAL sleeping just a little bit. Now, there is no Spore in the mineral line, but of course with 2 Queens here, that will be able to ward off this Oracle rather nicely. So, well, SERRAL, that was the one opening that Stats maybe had to get something done there. Is well, with the Spores not being there, maybe he could have got something done. But there are enough Queens on the map. 5 total already at 4 minutes and 19 seconds. That kind of gives you an idea of maybe what SERRAL's going to go for. But on the flip side, you know, it also does mean that there's not as much room to get something done. But hey, 3 workers go down, going to get targeted down there. That's going to be a nice little benefit, little bonus there for Stats. He just tries to get something done. And this is, even if Stats did take his third base at 350, this is not the standard double Stargate build that we have seen so often. No, we have a Twilight just about done, and it's going to be Dark Templar as the follow-up. This is pretty cool. This is new. Right, this is a new way to play out of the Stargate opener. Compared to how we've seen players playing for the most part. Now, of course, going for Oracles first does mean that any sort of DTs going on into a mineral line probably won't be all that impactful because, of course, well, there are spores in every mineral line. But as a... Well, actually, I'm kind of confused by this, right? So the Adepts will shade on into this third base, and it's just a bunch of Zerglings, which means not a whole lot going to get on in there. Meanwhile, of course, Oracles, they're going to try to get something done. They get 2 workers, but not all that much. Of course, the Adepts, they have a little bit of room to get a little bit more, but at the end of the day, still only 4 workers. So SERRAL has lost a grand total of 7 workers at this point. It's going to be nice for him, but I don't know how much damage this Dark Shrine is going to get done, to be totally honest. It feels like it's one of those things where you force your opponent to build something. And then you build this, and then you go for a tech that is self-countered by the thing that you've just forced your opponent to build. It's kind of the opposite idea of how Zergs used to play PvZ, right? Where they would go one tech and then just do a hardcore tech swap into another tech, and force the Protoss player just to have an inefficient army based off what they were built because of what they were building. Now the Dark Shrine is done, and I expect to see a Warp Prism coming on out here for the Robo, but the Robo, it's a little bit late maybe. And there's Blink on the way, so I don't really know what we're going to see with this Dark Shrine. So Robo's now done. Will we see a Warp Prism? Not yet. Anyway, the Oracles, of course, they're going to fly on in once again. Get a couple more workers, but at this point, it doesn't really matter. Still no Warp Prism. DT at the Dark Shrine still not used. This is incredibly intriguing. I almost wonder whether it's supposed to be just a ace in the hole for holding any sort of aggression there from SERRAL. Like, oh, it's going to be a Queen Roach Ravager thing. Well, I'm just going to warp in a couple DTs and target down your Observer, and, well, that's going to be that. Now, SERRAL has scouted the Dark Shrine at this point. So maybe that's why Stats is doing nothing. He's like, okay, look, I know you got a Spore in every base, and I know you also scouted the Dark Shrine. That's going to be that, but now we got Warp Prism Speed on the way. What in the world is Stats planning? Alright, so now we have Stats moving on out here, and it will be Disruptor drops, and that's pretty cool. So Speed Prism with Disruptors, powerful thing. Stats will not be able to keep this 4th base up, by the way. That's not going to happen. SERRAL is not playing right now. These are games from replays, EFG1. This, in fact, is the grand finals of the StayAtHome Story Cup. So, I don't actually remember. I believe this was played at a mutually sad time when this game actually did happen. It was played at at 1600 Central Daylight Time, so that is 17... it was played at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, which is somewhere around midnight, I think, in Europe, around where SERRAL is, and sometime in the morning there for stats. But now, 4th base is going to get killed this time, not even canceled. Yeah, but anyway, so charge slots are going to go on into the main base here, and yeah, this Warp Prism's not really... Oh, you know what? The Warp Prism may just escape. No, we'll not. We'll get targeted down. That last shot from the Hydras will be able to keep that alive. But now SERRAL, he's got Lurkers on the way. Well, he's Lurkers done, but he has Seismic Spines just about done here. He is solidly on 4 bases. I would like to see him get up to 6, but the big deal, of course, is he has denied the 4th base of stats twice. Once he killed, once he canceled. So stats not really in that powerful economic position that he would really like to be in. Now, of course, Storm is just about done, but you know what? I was gonna say there are no disruptors, but that is a daggone lie. 4 disruptors are on in here, but now we have the aggression of SERRAL coming on in here. Lurkers burrowed on up, just doing what they can to knock down as much of the units as possible, or as much of the structures as possible. Now, disruptor shots are going to go on in. SERRAL not paying attention here. He's not going to get the splits whatsoever. So 1 Lurker will go down, a bunch of roaches will go down. But of course, the goal of this also is to remove some of the roaches. You don't really need roaches in your army anymore. So if you can trade them out efficiently, that's going to be pretty nice. So now Lurkers on the high ground, and the Observer is going to go down. So finally, Stats is going to get his 4th base. That's the big thing here. That is what we got to be tracking more than anything else. Stats has his 4 bases. He has his 8 gases, right? And that's what you really need to make sure that you can trade efficiently, so you can get into that Skytoss army that Stats so it desperately wants to get on into. +1 air attack is on the way, as are the Fleet Bacon, a couple extra Stargates. So we will eventually see carriers hit the field. Now, the question, though, is whether SERRAL will be able to break Stats before then. Now, Disruptors are going to go on in once again, but now we have Vipers on the way. So, Disruptors are good against Lurkers, but Vipers are good against Disruptors. So, it's a little bit of a tit-for-tat. The stuck Lurker there is a bit unfortunate. It will go down. A little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it a tit-for-tat, but a kind of a rock, paper, scissors, but with multiple layers of rock, paper, scissors on in here. As now the Lurkers are going to burrow on up. And SERRAL, he set up a nice surround, but it looks like that surround will get found before he's got the surround fully on set up fully here. So a bunch of roaches will go down. A bunch of Ravagers as well. This is a fantastic trade here for Stats. He's going to trade so efficiently to make sure that he just gets about everything that he wants. Meanwhile, there's a run by up on the right-hand side. A bunch of Zealots are going to go on in, and the Lurkers are going to try to do what they can, but I think this base is just bare. Okay, actually, never mind. The base is going to get saved. Well done there from Stats, or from SERRAL, but Stats will be able to get this base on the bottom side. SERRAL should just cancel this, and he will not. That's a 1 dead base per player at this point. But now we're getting into that really cool part of the late game where stuff is happening everywhere on the map. Little bits of army, of SERRAL, of Stats, all over the map here. As everyone is looking to try to find some way to take an advantage. Now this DT, oh, there we go. So the base was saved, now it's not. So SERRAL now knocked back onto 4 bases from the 6 that he could have possibly had, and he's now on even bases with the Protoss player. That's never a good situation. Now, of course, with all of these High Templar, they can't really get in range of the Lurkers all that much, but also feedbacks are a thing. That's really why you have them. So it means the Disruptors are going to be that much more powerful. Now, this slow Zealot run by is going to warp on in here, and actually it's going to be really nice. It will get, at the very least, we'll get +1 armor, and +1 armor is so important when we are talking about how you deal with carriers, because again, carriers, they are really powerful. They do a lot of damage they attack really fast. So they do a lot of damage, but more importantly, they attack really fast. So armor is a lot more impactful for them versus something like a Colossus. Especially considering there will be this +2 timing from Stats that he's going to look to hit here. And you know what? The other thing, he's done a really good job of hiding the carrier count. Now, of course, if you're a Zerg player, you know that it's 13 minutes into this game. You know your opponent has 4 bases. That means that they will go into Skytoss. There is not a world where they stay on the ground army forever. That's just, it doesn't make sense. So you know there's going to be Stargate units on the field in some way, shape, or form, but you don't know how many, and you don't know how many upgrades there are. So that is the piece of information that SERRAL is lacking right now, and that's rather surprising, to be totally honest, because SERRAL, if he's known for anything, it's his incredible scouting. He's known for getting something into his opponent's main base every, 30 seconds. But I don't believe SERRAL has seen that yet. Has he? Okay, never mind. He has seen 2 of the 3 Stargates, but that's going to be about it. And now +3 Hydras just about done. We do not have Carapace. That's the big thing, because these are +2 carriers. And again, +2 carriers against +0 Hydras. The Hydras just cannot fight. I mean, sure, if it's, 20 Hydras against 1 carrier, sure, but in any sort of equal value, the carriers are just going to shred at the Hydra. So, of course, we do have Corruptors on the way, +1 air attack, and a Creator Spire. But now stats, he's going to take that 5th base. He's going to continue to have income parity with the Zerg player. Now, a bunch of Hydras are going to get found before anything else. So, Disruptor Shot's going to be nice. Stark's blinking on forward. And now we have the scary army of the Protoss taking the high ground here. And one thing I do like is SERRAL actually has a much better defensive setup this game than he did in the previous one. Yeah, he had Spores in both games, but this time he has army behind it. He has Lurkers on, he has Hydras, he has things that are going to make it scary to push on into that amount of static defense. Now, the War Prism's going to go down, that's going to be really nice. That's going to be one less thing that SERRAL has to deal with. But now, yeah, stats with that 5th base, with the sheer amount of static defense he's going to have here, it's going to be difficult for SERRAL to punish this. I mean, now maybe he could. But any time after that, it's not going to be all that useful. Now, Lurkers are going to be forced back, and I love the addition of Disruptors here because A, it deals with Lurkers well, but B, it really deals with static defense well. It's going to allow stats to burst down a lot of the static defense from range, so that is going to give him the room to then engage once the static defense is done. Alright, so now a bunch of carriers are on up here, and this is a really powerful position here for stats, since he's going to get the rest of his carriers moving on in. Disruptors are going to go on off. That means Lurkers are going to go down. Actually, it means a lot of Hydras are going to go on down here. Storms are going to not land all that great, but they are going to be on a fantastic on a bunch of Hydras. So we do have a couple more Lurkers on the way, of course, but how many Interceptors do we have? 86 Interceptors on the field. They have +2. Stats surprisingly not getting +3 as of yet. He just wants to get more and more Interceptors, but he certainly has the money for +3 at this point. And now the Interceptors, they will be released. There we go. Okay, so we're going to have Abducts on top of the Disruptors. That's going to be the name of the game here. But still 2 more Disruptors are here. Hydras are going to, of course... oh, there we go. Now we have the Loco maneuver coming on in. Corruptors are going to dive on top of all of these carriers, trying to knock down as many Interceptors as possible. How many Interceptors do we have on the field? 51, 49. We're going to see all of them pop in a second. But still 46 do remain. It's not going to be enough. GG, the +2 carrier timing will be enough. Stats, the champion of Stay-at-Home Story Cup, number 3. The first championship for Stats in a good bit of time. And that's going to be it, ladies and gentlemen. Stats, your champion of Stay-at-Home Story Cup, number 3.